Good evening, friends, and welcome back to another episode of Halloween Horror Nights with me, Andrea.M., and my little buddy Pugsley here. He has decided to join me for Halloween Horror Nights tonight. And as you can see tonight, it's yet another silly costume. And, well, it's not really a costume because I'm just being myself. I'm a witch. It's getting so close to Halloween now that I just couldn't resist putting on my witchy hair, my witchy hat, my witchy t-shirt, and reading the stories as a witchy poo tonight. If you would like to have your true scary stories included in Halloween Horror Nights with me, Andrea M., you can send them to me at Clarence Valley Paranormal @mail.com. Or you can send them to me on TikTok, you can send them to me on Reddit, and you can send them to me via our Clarence Valley Paranormal Facebook page if you would like to have your stories read here on the channel. So tonight, oh, Mr. Louie's awake. You going to come be on camera? Come on. He's so shy. He's not like Pugsley. Pugsley loves being on camera. Come on, Lou. He's here. I'm going to see. He might be frightened in my hat. I'm going to see if I can get him. Here's Louie joining us for Halloween Horror Nights. Louie doesn't come on camera much, so when I can get him, it's a real treat. Say hi, everyone. Oh, he wants to go. This Halloween Horror Nights my foot, Mum. I just want my dinner. Oh, yay. I finally got him on camera again. Okay, so as I was saying before, tonight's compilation of stories comes from Buzzfeed, and it was posted on the 23rd of August 2021. And the Buzzfeed staff member who posted the stories is Haneda Nafiz. She actually chose these stories and compiled them for Buzzfeed, as I've been trolling the internet looking for a few scary stories for us to read, and all the authors of the stories will, of course, be given full credit, and the stories do fall under the guidelines of fair use. So, without further ado, yeah. With Pugsley joining me, let's get into these 11 scary Buzzfeed stories. And I will be adding a little rain effect to this as well if you're using the stories to sleep. I will be going to just either a black screen or just some images that are spooky but also restful if you are using these stories to relax to. And this will be the last time you see me until I come on the end to say goodnight to everybody. So let's just get into these 11 scary Buzzfeed stories. Story number 1 by Lost in Oz 84. I was camping alone west of Julia Creek, Queensland. I was at a friend's cattle station just having a look around. Me and my dog were chilling late at night. It had to have been midnight at least. We were by the fire when my dog sat upright and growled. I figured it was just a roo and told him to shut up. But in the distance, I saw what looked like a match light a cigarette, then go dark. That night the sky was really open and bright, so I could see for miles. I grabbed the torch to have a look and saw nothing. So I settled back down and tried to go to sleep. But about half an hour later I smelled cigarette smoke. I sat up and grabbed my rifle and torch and started packing shit in the car, only to see a match flare again, about 100 metres away. Needless to say, I legged it back to the station house. I drove back in the morning and had a look around. I found cigarettes on the ground, but no footprints. Story number 2 by U Axialage. I live on a cattle property in rural Queensland. On one part of the property, there's this huge bit of virgin scrubland, so thick you can get lost in it, and that's almost as soon as you enter. I lived on this place 30 years and I couldn't draw you a map of that scrub, nor tell you about any landmarks that might help you to find your way. Anyway, one day the cattle broke into it And usually when that happens, we just call the muster off and wait for them to come back out for water or food and try again. But on this occasion, we needed the cattle that same day, so we all went into the scrub to find them. After 2 hours of chasing shadows around the bush and losing track of where anyone was, I find this thing in the middle of a clearing. It's like a totem or a scarecrow, and someone has built it out of old bits and pieces of fence line, rusted iron posts and crumbling wood, and they'd also incorporated animal bones. There's a pig skull at the top of it, but with a cow's jawbones, 3 sets of little kangaroo arms sticking out of it, all wrapped up together with barbed wire. My suspicion is my neighbour built it. He's known to be a little bit quirky, but usually in a corny, rustic, oh, you just have to listen to what the bush is telling you kind of way. If the bush told him to build it, I don't want to hear it. At any rate, I went off chasing the cattle, and when I told my friends about it, we went back to look at it. But we were unable to find it again. Story number 3 by Gusto88. This happened quite a few years ago in northern New South Wales. The old guy has passed now. A bluish, buzzing globe came down on the property, and he said he was taken up into a ship and transported to another planet. He said that he lived there for many years and had an alien family. When he returned, only a few minutes had passed. Later he goes to the local GP saying he's got an implant in his foot. The doc says it looks like a nail, and he said, "It can't be. I've counted all my nails and there's none missing." Anyway, the sighting was recorded back in '63, I think. Story number 4 by Yo Gorilla. I was in the Belangolo State Forest a few years back for a scout hike, an annual event attended by about 1,000 scouts and a couple of 100 leaders and other adults. My first time there, you try and forget about the reputation of the place, but everyone knows it, including the kids. At about 9 p.m, I decided to take a leak, and there was a queue for the Portaloo, so I decided to wander off into the trees instead. About 30 metres in, I shine my torch down and realise I'm standing in the middle of a bunch of scattered bones. It only took me about 3 seconds to realise they weren't actually human, but it was a bloody long 3 seconds. Story number 5 by Domestic Ape. So, Warragamba Dam has had some UFO sightings. Anyway, this is a pub story from a place nearby. One night, a local left his car after a few drinks. Along the dam, there is a steep embankment hugging the road. As this man drove, he saw a figure that was somehow lit, like glowing, wearing strange clothes and what seemed to be a very tall hat, walking down the steep embankment with a strangely smooth movement. Slowed as he approached, and the figure reached the bottom of the embankment and turned its head to look at the man. It then walked backwards, straight up the embankment while staring at him, and disappeared into the trees. The guy chucked a Yui and drove back to the pub. He then refused to drive home by himself. Story number 6 by Random User 1076. When I used to shoot for a living, I pulled up to gut the first lot for the night, lit a fire and put the billy on to make a cuppa. So I did the job, put the billy on the fire and reloaded. I was getting the tags and that ready while having a smoke and a cuppa, kicked some guts out of the way, and there was no heart. I thought it was a bit odd. Someone had come through and taken all the hearts. Story number 7 by Epic Pillowcase. Not in the country, but suburban Melbourne, Burwood Highway. Around 9 p.m. one night, I saw strange orange lights in the sky. They were moving, then making shapes, then hanging kind of stationary, then slowly drifting. I thought I was imagining it until I saw that several cars had pulled over to watch them. Anyway, if you Google it, I'm pretty sure there were others who said they saw the same thing. I hardly tell anyone that story because I know it sounds like a bunch of bull. I wasn't creeped out though, and it was pretty cool. Story number 8, also by Epic Pillowcase. Not the true outback, but a nature reserve near Canberra. The wife and I were doing a short trail run near dusk, and as we crested a hill, the sun set over the ranges behind us. In seconds, we went from almost full sunlight to the half-light of dusk. At the same time, all of the bird song and insect noises stopped, dead. I had an overwhelming urge to pick up the pace and get the hell out of there. All the hairs were up on my arms and the back of my neck, and for no reason other than some deep-seated, irrational fear. Story number 9 by Barbs. Back in 2009, I was camping on the beach with my wife, her friend, and my younger brother at a national park near Barriga Beach, south of Bundaberg. We had a great night, lots of drinking, had a big fire, lots of fun stories before going to bed at around 1 a.m. I was still talking to my wife in a 2-man tent at 3 a.m. when a big ute comes out of nowhere down the dirt track to the area where we were camping and pulls up right in front of our site with a high beam on and the hunting lights at full blast. Now, my brother and I aren't small. We're 6'2" and played our fair share of rugby, but I was absolutely beside myself. The ute doesn't move for about a minute, just blinding us with its lights while the engine is humming and chugging. That's when my brother steps up. He gets out of his swag, walks over to the fire, picks up an axe, throws it over his shoulder, and walks up to the ute and stares it down from 5 meters in front of it. The standoff ensues for about 5 to 10 seconds before I get out to join him. Another few seconds later, the ute slowly reverses, then goes back down the bumpy dirt path it came from. All of us stayed awake and alert until sunrise, absolutely crapping ourselves. Story number 10, again by Epic Pillowcase. There are long stretches of the Stuart Highway of nothing, straight as an arrow and not a single crossroad. I was driving late at night, part of dingo observation, and suddenly I see 2 lights behind me. I reasoned with myself and assumed that I had zoned out and a car had come upon me. Suddenly, one of the lights started to weave. Okay, 2 motorbikes. They followed me for a while, still in my rearview mirror, still no closer. Suddenly, one rises into the air and shoots off across the Spinifex. The other continues to follow me and then slowly fades into the night. If I were to put a name to them, it would be Min lights. But mostly, I just go on with life. Story 11 by Man LikevRealities. A friend of mine is a volunteer who's involved in wildlife rescue, bushfire management, and the sorts. He received a call about a couple of tourists who got it in their heads that they could load up a little rented car with some snacks and tunes and drive it across the Australian bush. They had no understanding of the rough terrain, isolation, and good luck in finding a gas station, and how cold the bush becomes at night. Their friends hadn't heard from them in a few days. My friend was near Alice Springs, which is one of the locations they could have ended up at. It's a lot of ground to cover, but he did his part and spent the day just driving around on dirt roads. He drove past familiar farms into the real outback, just miles of red dust and dry air. He didn't find a broken down car, tourists, or anything except endless trees and scrubs. It began to get dark, so he turned around to head home. On his way back, he noticed something about one of the low-growing trees he didn't discern before. Hair. Human hair. Tufts of blonde hair were twisted around its branches. He slowed down. More hair. At least a dozen trees were decorated with locks of blonde hair, and he couldn't tell if they were speckled with red dirt or blood. When the gravity of the situation sunk in, he floored it. He frantically began radioing in to the shack in the town, and he says he probably sounded crazy or drunk. He lived in the country all his life, but swears that he'll never visit the outback at night again without another volunteer at least accompanying him. And there you have it. That is our 11 very scary stories from Australia from Buzzfeed. And thank you so much to the authors of these stories. That last one gave me the chills. Can you imagine just you're driving along during your job, or you're coming home from work, and then all of a sudden there's people's hair hanging in the trees on the side of the road. Oh my goodness. That's, Wolf Creek pretty much did it for me, that I don't want to go exploring in the outback anytime soon. But if I hadn't seen Wolf Creek, that story right there would have done it for me. So I have one more story, and it is a story of my own from when I was about 10 years old. And it was getting close to Christmas, probably 22nd, 23rd of December. Don't remember the year. But I was, throwing some treats out to my dogs. At the time this is when I was living in the Conjuring House, as I call it. And at the time, our back steps were gone. And the house that I lived in was actually a stilt house because it was built on the floodplain in Grafton. And at that time, we had a safety railing across because the back stairs were gone. We had to get new stairs put in because all the floods and everything over the years, the stairs had rotted and they were unsafe. So I was just tossing some snacks out to the dogs who were waiting below, and all of a sudden I realised everything had gotten very eerily quiet, and I felt like I was being watched, and I don't know why, but I happened to look up, and when I looked up, what I saw was what I can only describe as a UFO hovering very close to our house. As soon as I saw it, I was just awestruck, and I called out to my mother and to my grandmother, who came running because they thought something was wrong. I obviously sounded scared, and they looked up and they also saw what we can only describe as a UFO. It was round in shape, it had many coloured lights around the side, and it was just sitting there. It was absolutely silent. The dogs were quiet down below, like usually they would bark at something like that. But the entire neighbourhood was completely silent. And you have to think, this is getting close to Christmas. We had an RSL club just down the road. There were Christmas parties going on. There was all sorts. And it was eerily quiet. As we watched it, it all of a sudden shot up into the air. It moved across the house and it was gone. And the minute it sort of moved, everything came back to life. You could hear crickets chirping. The dogs started barking and howling. All the dogs in the neighbourhood started barking and howling. And when we told friends about it the next day, some of our neighbours also actually saw the craft, as it were. And we've never seen it again. I was often looking for it. I kind of wanted it to come back, as you do when you're a child. But yeah, that was one of my scary stories from when I lived in what I can only describe as Australia's version of the Conjuring House. And yeah, and as you know, with the actual Conjuring House in the US, it does have its fair share of extraterrestrial visitors, as I've seen on some of the videos here on YouTube. Our Conjuring House was the same. So that's it from me for this week's instalment of Halloween Horror Nights with Andrea M and our little friend Pugsley. Mr. Louis has also returned, but he is asleep, so I won't disturb him. So thank you guys again for watching or listening or whatever it is you wanted to do. I hope these stories have relaxed you and lulled you off to sleep. If not, I apologise, they were pretty creepy. So, as I said before, if you want to send me some of your scary stories, I will leave links in the description box below. Thank you all so much for listening again, and I will see you all again soon. Sleep tight and stay safe. Love you all.